This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainer writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, who's kind of under the weather tonight, folks, Eric Hersey.
Listen, we're always under the weather, and I'll tell you where it came from. It's doing a double-decker bus tour in Vegas when it was only 50 degrees, and it actually even was sprinkling. And this is a desert, Jim. I didn't realize that. Our first stop was immediately to find cheap hoodies.
Okay.
So we made it happen, but that we basically left Vegas with some colds, but we're gonna make it all right.
Okay. Now, I quick question again. Obviously, anyone who listened to the show last week or thereabouts, you were sent out there with an assignment to peek over the fence at the what is it? The Universal Horror Unleashed. Did you guys actually manage to make it down there, or?
Listen, I'm gonna thank a vlogger, prolific vlogger, Adam the Woo, because believe it or not,
Woo!
Listen, Adam the Woo was in Vegas at the exact same time we were, and he beat us to the punch and actually saved me the trip because it was on that Tuesday, I think, he went over to the Mega Mart, which is right next. So the Area 15, which is that area. Because I looked it up on the map and I'm like, all right, how are we going to get there?
Okay.
And he actually went and vlogged and showcased everything. And we get to the structure, what it looks to be, the Universal thing. Nothing worth going for me. Because it was structured, nothing to see. And I'm like, Adam, thank you so much. You saved us probably a good hour of our, time to go out of the way. You probably saved me $20 in Uber. But it didn't look like there was anything. He looked around and he's like, I can't tell what is what. And here's some building stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I would love to peek over the fence, but I don't even know where this is at. And he couldn't figure it out either. So I will give him credit.
Well, thanks to Adam the Woo. By the way, Adam and I have something in common. Both of us annoyed Disney greatly several decades ago. So, but it's nice to see him back out there again. How cool.
Oh, okay. He's doing his thing. But yeah, he's all over Vegas. But I listen, we have no relation or anything, but the Daily Woo is a great follow if you just want to get some travel vlog. And he's out in Vegas right now. He was there the same time as we were, so that was kind of cool.
Okay. And one other quick question, because of course we have kind of a professional relationship with the folks at Cirque, and you and Lauren actually got to see a Cirque show out there, right?
Oh yes, and there's a lot of them. I did not realize if I would have known better. Firstly, I would have made it out to Vegas a lot sooner because I would have loved to see the Beatles one, which the Mirage is getting torn down as we find out. So that's no longer there. But we just saw the Mystery which is 30 years. It's been in Treasure Island for 30 years. I can't believe that, but it was a wonderful show. A bit weird. But they all kind of are.
No, right? The Cirque is proud to occupy that weird little corner of entertainment. In fact, how is it that Mr. Testa describes them? The bendy French people?
The bendy French people, yes. Well, I will tell you, it was a wonderful show. Great seats, lots of great stuff. And it's funny, producer Dave and I were talking, and he's seen all of them there except for that one because he's a big fan. So he's like, which one are you going to? And I'm like, he's like, honestly, that's the only. And I told him, it's been there for 30 years because he's a Vegas guy. He likes to do that. So I will tell you that we've seen 3 or 4 Cirque shows now in our life, and I still do believe the one down at Disney Springs is my favorite. Not just Disney, but it has a good story. So for those, if you're not familiar, go listen to the Disney Dish and you'll hear all about it. And buy yourself some tickets, right?
There we go. Okay. Well, and speaking of gratuitous plugs, I guess we should get to our sponsor here. So, and that is, of course, Be Our Guest Vacations. And we are only 69 days away from the opening of Epic Universe. And so, what are you waiting for? Let Be Our Guest Vacation help you plan your next epic vacation. They specialize in providing concierge level service for trips to the Universal Orlando Resort, likewise their Hollywood Park, the Disney parks, cruises, and so much more. So visit beourguestvacations.com today to get started. And don't forget to tell them that the Epic Universal podcast sent you. So we've talked Vegas, we've talked heads colds. It's now time to talk about Universal. And so what news did you dig up for this week?
Well, I think you actually might have dug this one up, sent it over. So you saw the story in the Hollywood Reporter, right? It was a big old feature.
I did, yeah. In fact, it was fascinating to have this story bubble up pretty much in the same window of time as when Disney was at South by Southwest.
Yeah,
doing
lots
of news coming out of that one too. But.
Right, it was funny. Well, I thought this was interesting, so I was kind of looking at this to see if there was anything new, because at this point in time, we know a lot about Epic. We know that there are people in there, and I haven't really seen too many leaked photos of team members in there.
No.
But they did have some information in here that was kind of breaking. I mean, if anybody knew about it, I is the first to see it. So I kind of made a little list of some of the stuff. But this is kind of your gig, is like when you get these access reports, they give you some nuggets, right? Is that kind of the deal? Is they want to give you a little nuggets to make it a little bit more exclusive, or to get people to read that article? Is that kind of how it works when you get that access?
Again, and the notion is that, you have only so many playing cards. So it's like, okay, these go to the Hollywood Reporter, and that one goes to Deadline, and this one goes to Variety. You get the drift.
Right. So that's kind of what I saw here. So if you want to go, we can go through some of these just to see if it's anything. I don't know if you've heard this, but I kind of made a little list. So start off with the Isle of Berk, and we did a lot of talking about Berk last week. But did you know this is the largest land by square footage in that park? And I didn't realize that.
I had not put that together yet. And in fact, if I had previously been a betting man, I would have laid down a card for Dark Universe, because supposedly they have an expansion pad in there that's being held back for a Creature from the Black Lagoon thing.
Right. And somebody mentioned, and I didn't put that in the news this week, but it's great that you mentioned that. There was a high-ranking executive that says we already have plans, like, for our next thing for Epic Universe. Did you hear that?
I did not.
Where they already there's a quote out there, and then everybody's speculating what new attraction. So they're already working on like a phase 2, which is awesome to hear. But they're saying you could fit 2 other lands inside if you remove the big rides in Isle of Berk, which is crazy. So I didn't realize it was that large. And I guess if you're on X or any of the socials, you are getting people commenting. And there are a lot of people saying that this is the surprise land. They didn't realize how immersive and how beautiful and how great it was. So there's a lot of people out there talking, the team members, basically saying, hey, don't sleep on Berk. And I kind of slept on the size. I didn't realize it was that big.
Wow. Okay.
2 bodies of water in there as well, which none of the other lands have. So this is where you're getting the water, besides like the fountains and stuff in Celestial Park.
Well, given that it's the island of Berk, and then coupled with the water fight attraction we were talking about on our last show, not exactly a surprise, but.
Right. And I guess there's Viking Band is confirmed. And I don't know if you've seen any of the overhead shots you have. I've got to see, we all got to see kind of some of the walk around characters, but there's a Viking Band that was confirmed in this article, which is nice to see. Not necessarily sure. I think they might be playing near the Mead. Is it the Mead Hall or one of the halls? This isn't necessarily breaking news, but Monsters Unchained. It turns out that most of the characters are not going to be massive. They're basically from like 4 to 9 feet tall. That was kind of broken there. And then they also did confirm that there's jump scares and stuff in the queue, which is going to make it hard sell for me to get my kids on this. But we'll just have to make them scare people in general. That will be their task. You scare others, and then when they get scared, it'll.
Well, there we go.
You be part of the show.
Okay.
Right?
All right. Okay, let's see what Miles comes up with. So,
right. Okay. But did you see anybody online kind of, I mean, this has been like everybody is praising Monsters Unchained. Like everybody is saying that is the the ride that everybody is gawking about right now.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, like almost to the point where there was some online memes going out that because so many people were talking about Monsters Unchained being like amazing, better than you thought it would be. Almost now people are like kind of making jokes about, did you see, and they'll pick some, like It's a Small World and make some joke about how it's the greatest thing of all time. So it'll be interesting to see there.
Okay.
Another thing that was mentioned is that the Celestial Park has a 40-hour music loop with 16 background music zones. So like, good luck getting all of those tracks, I guess.
Wow. Okay. Because there's a whole subset of folks who collectors of theme park audio. In fact, I've relied on these folks forever.
Right.
Whether it's attractions that are long gone, where somebody's collected, we have the cue music, we have the 35 variations on how they did the cue music, and but wow, 40-hour music loop.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
And then the Stardust Racer coaster changes between a daytime brassy and a nighttime synthy. So like it's, I guess it gets a little 80s maybe. So I'll be interested to hear, but those are all kind of some of the things that were brought out. I think the carousel has 7 different compositions. But those were all kind of things that when I looked through it, I didn't see released elsewhere, but that came out of that Hollywood Reporter thing. So if you're looking for some more information before you plan your trip or to head down there, this is a lot of new information that kind of dug out. So thank you for sending that article over to me and then kind of dig through.
Just again, you and your bride were in Vegas, and I wanted to do my part. You're always so good about chasing down the news. And speaking of which, how did I miss this story about you were just talking about Stardust Racers and there's really images out there of this
I think Bio Reconstruct captured a lot of it, right? The big cranes getting it. So I wasn't sure at first, but I did see it online. I think Bio might have been first to report it. He was definitely the one I saw it off of. But yeah, the train got stuck and they had to basically get it off the track. So yeah, Stardust Racer. So I'm super happy that they have a testing period because this is my worst fear. Someone who loves coasters but scared of heights, right? So getting stuck on the top of or on any coaster just terrifies me to death. But it was testing, and have you seen the test? It like just even at nighttime, how they have this set up. Beautiful. It is going to be amazing.
Okay. Now it's worth noting that in the early days of Rip Ride Rocket over Universal Studios Florida, this happened there as well. I don't recall them having to bring in a crane to remove the stalled vehicle, but yeah, they had a coaster car that valleyed. For some reason, had a momentum issue and just could not get out of a set point. But
well, that's kind of what it was here, right? It's basically the fact is that it just didn't, it lacked enough of momentum. It didn't get up the hill. And you could see through the last so many weeks of them testing, because this is for those not really familiar and haven't listened to the show at all, this is the one that's kind of like a racer and it's synchronized that it goes, it's almost like the Dueling Dragons in a sense, right? Because they used to have that moment where they kind of cross over and get real close. Well, that's kind of this thing is part of the beauty is that it's synchronized. So they've been having to test and adjust based off stuff. And I know that the technology is cutting edge to be able to understand how many people are on and how much that weighs and how fast and lots of math, Jim, that I'm not going to do and can't even pretend to do. But let's just say the math didn't work out one day. They had to get the cranes in, which was interesting. So seek that out on online if you guys are interested in looking at that.
All right. Speaking of which, so now, did this happen during one of the team member previews or as you mentioned, this thing's been running 24/7.
I don't think there were anybody on. I don't think there was anybody on it. I have to go back and look at it. I think it was like an early morning or late night thing, and they had the crane in there. They said it was fully operational by the afternoon. So I don't think there was anybody. I think it was just part of the testing, which is why we're happy they're doing it.
Okay. But to get back to, again, as we talked about on a previous edition of the Epic Universal podcast, we're now in the middle of team member previews of the Epic Universe Park. And kind of interesting that they're sort of changing up how often people can experience this, right?
Yeah, well, before I think you could go there 2 or 3, 4 times or something like that. But now it's a matter of they let you do it 8 times.
Mm-hmm.
So they are obviously either doing really, really well at getting people in and out and getting experience, or they need more testing or what have you. But originally it was from March 1st to 7th, and you could visit per team member, like one. And then from the 1st to the 14th, you could visit up to 3 times. And now the expansion of that allows you to 5 additional visits, now allowing you to be in the park for 8 total visits. So some people are, I've already saw online, because the thing is they're not allowed to take pictures, but team members are definitely giving us the, oh my goodness. And I don't know if they're instructed to do this. I mean, from a PR perspective, my algorithms are just 100% people talking about the greatest thing ever. And I got to ride this, and here's my ranking of the 7 coasters that I got to do, or whatever like that. So I imagine now they're going to get to really, really try out every single one of these attractions.
Wow. Okay. Just and again, remember, we're still have another full couple of days yet, right? Till the first expansion, and then into our second expansion. Going to be interesting to have folks. What's going to intrigue me is folks who've been in the park already 1 or 2 times, who were then commenting about, okay, this changed, or this effect got turned on, or that sort of thing. It's those stories I'm looking forward to. And
and maybe they'll start throwing them out online. Maybe they'll start saying, hey, this is this. It seemed to me like there were definitely some attractions that weren't necessarily running operationally as well. I don't think the Potter ride has I haven't saw anybody talk about it yet, so I don't even know if it's been running.
That's the moonshot. And everything we heard initially was they were going to struggle to get that one open for opening day. Now that doesn't seem to be a problem, but at the same time it's a lot of moving parts. So on the other hand, when we get back from this break, we're going to talk about an attraction that used to be out at Universal Studios Hollywood that, let's be honest here, didn't have a lot of moving parts. In fact, things that moved under their own power. And we're talking, of course, about Ma Pa Kettle's petting zoo at that theme park back in the 1960s, and more in a bit. But first, this.
More rewards, more savings. With American Express Business Gold, earn up to $395 back in annual statement credits on eligible purchases at select shipping, food delivery, and retail subscription merchants, including the $155 Walmart Plus monthly membership credit and $240 flexible business credit. Enjoy the benefits of membership with the Amex Business Gold Card. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold Card. Built for business by American Express.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Hi, this is Debbie, your Blinds.com design consultant.
Oh, wow. A real person.
Yep. I am here to help you with everything from selecting the perfect window treatments to...
Well, I've got a complicated project.
Oh, not a problem. I can even schedule a professional measure and install. We can also send you samples, fast and free.
I just might have to do more.
Oh, okay.
So the first room we're looking at is for guests.
Shop Blinds.com now and save up to 45% site-wide. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
And we're back. Okay, folks, if you've listened to the Epic Universal podcast previously, you know that Eric and I love hearing from our listeners, and we got a terrific letter a while back from Mark and Jody Rugg, who wrote in to say, hi, Jim and Eric. We just finished listening to your 2-part episode about the Munsters, and you talked about the new Universal Tram Tour in '64 and how, if you were lucky, you might be able to see Fred Gwynn and Al Lewis dressed as Herman and Grandpa. Well, Jody was just 4 years old in 1965 and rode the tram tour in January of that year. Her family has always told the story about how when they rode the tram tour and got to see the cast of the Munsters shooting one of the TV show scenes outside of the house at 1313 Mockingbird Lane. And evidently, Fred Gwynne is outside, and as they drove by, Jody's older brother yelled, "Hey, Herman!" And Fred turned around and gave a big wave to everybody in the tram. And Jody doesn't remember much more than that. She was 4, but remembers Fred waving to them. That said, Ms. Rugg has some pictures of the family in the tram that show the great view from the tram cars. Also, photos of the cars from It's a Mad, Mad World that were parked by the Bates. Mom Bates' house by the Psycho. They were nice enough to send these along. Also had pictures of the house at Ma Pa Kettle, and also the lagoon where McHale's Navy was filmed, and closes, but thanks to the great podcast. And again, that's Mark and Jody Rugg. And I have to tell you, folks, that Eric and I have already been talking about doing a feature for this podcast, which would then focus on McHale's Navy, which, by the way, was shot on the lower lot from 62 to 66. So what's interesting about that TV show is actually predates the Universal tram tour from 64. And again, she mentions the cars from It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And Eric, there's a great story there also about how a key scene from that Stanley Kramer film was actually shot on the Universal backlot. In fact, I want to say it was in the earlier iteration of Courthouse Square, which, of course, we all know from the Back to the Future films.
Okay.
But as for Ma and Pa Kettle, unless you're an old fart like me, and by the way, Eric turned 66 this week. So anyway, you may not be familiar with these Universal produced films. It's a series that ran from 49 to 57, but these characters, Ma and Pa Kettle, were featured in 10 films in total. With the very first featuring Ma and Pa Kettle. By the way, it'll have a name that will resonate to folks who've been to the grocery store lately, especially those of you who look at a carton of eggs and think, well, I guess I could arrange a second mortgage. But yeah, because Ma and Pa Kettle as characters were first introduced to the world in Betty McDonald's humorous memoir, The Egg and I. This book was first published back in October of 45, Eric, and it tells the story of Betty and her husband, Robert. They ran a chicken farm out on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, and you hear that, and it's like, okay, that doesn't sound like a New York Times bestseller to me. Wrong. This memoir stayed at the top of the bestsellers list for almost 2 years. Not only that, more than 30 million copies were sold, and the book was eventually translated into 32 languages. And it's like,
what? I want to know what else was put out in 45. It was the only book alive. I don't know, but I didn't read. I don't know much about it. So
same thing here.
I won't pass judgment.
Okay, but again, when you sell that many books, Hollywood notices, and especially Universal Pictures. They buy the film rights to The Egg and I in April of 46. And by the way, McDonald was enough of a Sharpie that she insisted that should the studio actually go forward with turning her memoir into a movie, she would receive a percentage of the ticket sales. So,
oh wow,
smart lady,
smart move there.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. All right. Anyway, once they strike the deal with the publisher, this is J.P. Lippincott Company published the book. Universal moves quickly to get Egg and I in front of the cameras. They cast Academy Award winner Claudette Colbert to play Betty. And as for Betty's husband, Robert, they go with Fred MacMurray, who, by the way, Eric, the very first Disney legend. He was singled out for that honor because I guess he, at that He had appeared in a total of 7 movies for Disney
Wow.
Studios. Shaggy Dog, As I Met a Professor, Son of Flubber, Bon Voyage, Follow Me Boys, Happiest Millionaire, and finally Charlie and the Angel. So when they got the Disney Legend program up and running in October of '87, Fred was the first guy. But again, we're not here to talk Disney. We're here to talk Universal and how one of the very first of this company's theme parks, Universal Studios Hollywood, wound up with a Ma and Pa Kettle petting zoo in the 1960s. Okay, so this takes us back to the Egg and I, and a lot of the humor in Betty McDonald's memoir came from her interaction with her next door neighbors, the Kettles, who were this old married couple with a lot of kids. In fact, when they finally make the movie, I want to say the Kettles start off with 13 kids, and by the end of the series have 14. But they live in this tumble down farmhouse, and Ma and Pa, they seem simple, but they are also good-hearted country folk who are always ready to give Betty a hand when farm life gets to be a bit much for this former city girl. And but when it came time to cast these 2 roles in the movie version of Egg and I, Universal decided to go with 2 of Hollywood's very best character actors, and that's Marjorie Main and Percy Kilbride. Now, Marjorie Main had been a contract player at MGM since 1940, and she had reliably been stealing scenes in movies. I mean, up against A-listers like Judy Garland in Meet Me in St. Louis, and she'd steal a scene out from under her. Marjorie specialized in playing these powerful women who weren't afraid to speak their minds and had no problem telling men where and when they could get off. And by the way, MGM so appreciated Maine's efforts that just prior to the start of production of Egg and I, they took her original 7-year contract and extended it for another 7 years, which made Marjorie an employee of MGM right through the end of 54. And now, on the other hand, Percy Kilbride, he had only arrived in Hollywood in 1942. This was when Warner Brothers wanted to make a movie version of George Washington Slept Here, and was trying to persuade then hugely popular radio comedian Jack Benny to play the lead in a big screen version of this hit Kaufman and Hart comedy. And Benny told Warner Brothers that he would only play this role in the movie version of George Washington Slept Here if they hired Percy Kilbride, because Benny had gone to New York, seen the show, and Percy was a member of the cast of the Broadway show, and he got such big laughs as Mr. Kimber, the local handyman, that he's like, no, I'm not going to make this unless you bring that guy. He's got 10 of the biggest laughs in the show, and I want those in the movie. Anyway, Kilbride comes out to Hollywood in 42. And the role he plays in George Washington Slept Here, soft-spoken local yokel who only pretends to be dumb, who turns out to be is a lot smarter than those city slickers realize. But Hollywood loves him, and this is a role Percy quickly gets typecast in, which again isn't initially a problem because Kilbride, he likes being employed,
Right, yeah.
And so when Universal offers him the part of Pa Kettle in The Egg and I, Percy immediately says yes. And more to the point, he's thrilled when he learns that his scene partner in this movie is going to be Marjorie Main. So, and in a lot of ways, it's a dream pairing of performers. Marjorie is big and tall and powerful, and Percy is small and thin and kind of on the meek side. So, Maine is loud and tends to overplay scenes, and Kilbride is quiet and tends to underreact. And so he's yin to her yang. And now, where this gets interesting, Eric, is that because Maine is under contract to MGM, every time she appeared in a movie for Universal Picture. By the way, this practice was known as loaning out a player back in the day. So these two studios would effectively horse trade, with Universal lending MGM one of its biggest stars so that they could then appear in a movie for that studio in exchange for Universal getting the rights to use Marjorie in one of their movies. So anyway, Egg and I gets in front of the cameras. Executives start seeing the rushes, and they know right from the get-go, not only do they have a hit on the hand because Claudette Colbert and Fred McMurray are turning in super performances as Betty and Robert McDonald, but they also potentially have a brand new series for the studio on their hands. That's because in every scene where Claudette and Fred share the screen with either Marjorie or Percy, or the two of them combined, Ma and Pa Kettle just steal the movie out from under them. These two country bumpkin characters are just sheer cinematic gold. And by the way, I'm not the only one who thinks this. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences agrees with this assessment, because right after The Egg and I arrives in theaters in March of 1947, Marjorie Main is then nominated for an Academy Award in the Best Supporting Actress category. That's how many people out west were impressed by her performance. By the way, didn't take home the gold, got nominated. That year's award went to Celeste Holm for her work in Gentleman's Agreement. But anyway, back to Ma Pa Kettle. Since Egg and I turned out to be the third highest grossing film for all of 1947, Universal was very quick to spin these two characters off into their own series with the first of what eventually would be 9 movies.
Jeez.
The Further Adventure, this is the actual title, The Further Adventures of Ma Pa Kettle, arriving in theaters in April of 1949. Now, what's important to remember about the Ma Pa Kettle film series is, well, these movies came along at a time when Universal, like so many other studios out west, were facing increasing competition from television. There were years between 1949 and 1957. By the way, that's the year the final Ma and Pa Kettle film. The Kettles on Old MacDonald's Farm. That it was released in theaters May 10th, 1957. It was these movies, Eric, that effectively kept the lights on at the studio. And it was just simple math. It was one of these things. The Ma and Pa Kettle movies were so cheap for Universal to make that they each of them only cost $200,000 to make. And they'd send them out into theaters like clockwork. In fact, it was this time of year they would do it, late winter, early spring, sometime between March and May. And Universal would always predictably get 10 times back what they spent on making a Ma and Pa Kettle just in North American ticket sales. And by the way, one of the reasons the Ma and Pa Kettle films were so cheap for Universal to make, because they kept the couple's tumble-down farmhouse, which was located on the movie ranch, right there in the Universal lot there at Universal City. They kept it standing for years. And
that's a pretty good temporary prop.
Yeah, well, there you go. So how do we then get from Ma and Pa Kettle movie series shutting down in 1957 to Ma and Pa Kettle's Farm's petting zoo setting up shop on the upper lot in the mid to late 1960s? We will get to that part of the story in a moment. But first, this.
Take your plans out of the group chat and get long weekend ready in new Abercrombie. From day to night, pack new outfits for every part of your itinerary. Grabbing brunch? Throw on the A&F Mila dress. Then head to your dinner reservation in their new bubble hem mini dress. And yes, permission to overpack for pics with the girls. Abercrombie's best-selling Scarlet Squirt deserves a post in your feed. Your plans are worth it. Shop Abercrombie's new long weekend collection online or in store.
It's always a good time to celebrate your team. With designs for every occasion, Starbucks cards are the perfect thank you for employees and clients alike. Did you know that you can easily order gift cards in bulk directly from Starbucks at StarbucksCardB2B.com? Give your team the recognition they deserve with a gift they're sure to use. They're thoughtful gifts for special occasions, events, or just because. With digital, physical, and customizable card options, gifting is made easy through StarbucksCardB2B.com.
And we're back. Okay, Eric and I were just talking about the Ma Pa Kettle film series, which again, over the course of 9 films, did things like send the Kettles and their 14 kids to New York City, to France, to the Ozarks, even Waikiki.
Okay.
Anything to give Marjorie Main and Percy Kilbride new things to react to. But by the way, where this gets interesting, by 55, Percy had had his fill of playing Pa. He officially bowed out of the film series after Ma Pa Kettle traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, and whereas Marjorie actually hung in there for 2 more movies. There was the Kettles in the Ozarks, where Ma travels to meet Pa's good-for-nothing brother, Sedgwick, who's played by a Universal contract player called Arthur Honeycutt. And then there was the Kettles on Old MacDonald's farm, where Universal actually tried a new actor in the role of Pa Kettle, one Parker Fennelly, who spent a lot of time with a hand in front of his face or a hat pulled down over his eyes. And sadly, Parker and Marjorie just didn't have the magic that Main and Kilbride did. And given that ticket sales for the Kettles at Old MacDonald Farm were significantly lower than the previous installments, the executive at Universal Pictures decided, okay, the handwriting's on the wall, and it's finally time to foreclose on Ma Pa Kettle's farm. But again, series had an incredibly good run, Eric, with the Ma Pa Kettle characters, again, introduced with the Egg and I back in October of 47, and starring in 9 of their films right up through May of 57. So that's more than a decade of employment out in a town where you're lucky if you get to appear even in just one movie.
That's got to be the dream for so many.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Just to get that kind of, power to them.
Yeah, well, all right. So, and again, as we mentioned earlier in the show, the Ma Pa Kettle movies have been a steady revenue stream for Universal Pictures during those years when television was really starting to eat into film studios' profits. So again, the folks at Universal were genuinely grateful to have the Ma Pa Kettle series run as long as it did. But that said, Eric, there were also folks at Universal who were grateful for the Ma Pa Kettle films because, well, again, as long as the studio was making these movies, they kept that farmhouse standing on the Universal Movie Ranch. And as a dad of young children, you'll appreciate this. Think about it. It's Saturday. And your kids want to go do something, and you work at Universal. So it's like, well, okay, let's drive over the lot. And we can swing by the set for Ma Pa Kettle because they always kept the horses and the cows and the pigs and the goats there. Dad could duck into work for a little bit and leave the kids there to pet the goats or feed the pigs.
So it was like a real farm. They literally had actual animals there. It wasn't just...
Yeah.
What the...
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
All right.
That was a twist. I didn't realize that.
Well, again, it was a movie ranch, and on a ranch you have animals. Okay, so this now brings us to the second year that Universal tram tour is in operation at Hollywood. This would have been 1965, when the operations team at Universal City is beginning to realize, well, all right, we've got to give the people who are on the upper lot, who are waiting to get on the tram tour, something to do. And this area now has been redubbed the Visitor Entertainment Center. And it's like, well, we better give them something entertaining to do. And this is when one studio veteran goes, oh, now, wait a minute. I remember bringing my kids here in the 50s and how they love going to Ma Pa Kettle's farm and petting the goats. We have that set. Why don't we move that up to the upper lot? And people, while they're waiting for the tram tour, their kids can go visit the farm and feed the horses or whatever. And now, mind you, the original Ma Pa Kettle farmhouse had long since been flattened, Eric. In fact, I
imagine.
I want to say they tore it down to make way for Universal made a a movie called The Warlord that it was a Charlton Heston sword and armor thing that they released in theaters in November of 65. But again, it was like, we got pictures, or nobody really remembers what that place looked like.
Right.
You'll just put it up.
There's no DVRs or VCRs back then, right? You're just using your memories. Yeah. It's a farm.
So they build. In fact, the funny part is that they not only build a Ma Pa Kettle farm, not a replica, but something that literally has a sign on it that says Ma Pa Kettle's farm. So it's like, all right, it's Ma Pa Kettle's farm. And it's a petting zoo. But while they're putting that up there, they actually drag the Warlord's Tower up to the upper lot as well. And that becomes an attraction in the visitor center. And for about 3 years in the mid to late 60s, you could visit Ma Pa Kettle's petting zoo. But mind you, kind of an interesting mix of animals there, Eric. In addition to petting those cute little goats, you could also look at some of the birds, some of the trained birds from Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. It's like, now I have to wonder, well, what actually happened to Ma Pa Kettle?
Right.
Is there a story you're not telling me here? But yeah, because of course that's what I look for when I go to a petting zoo. Where are the animals that could potentially attack me and peck my eyes out?
Right.
Anyway, as the 60s give way to the 70s, fewer and fewer people know who Ma Pa Kettle are, which is why Universal rebrands its petting zoo as the Ark Park, which supposedly took its inspiration from John Huston's Bible movie in the beginning, which, by the way, 20th Century Fox rather than Universal put out in September of 66. But anyway, as it turns out by now, folks who are visiting Universal Studios Hollywood, they don't want to pet goats or get spat on by llamas. They want to see animals in action, which led to the creation of the Animal Actors Stage School show, which debuts in the Upper Lot in 1970 and was still going strong as of January of 2023. Sadly, that was when this facility was first closed and then torn down to make way for Universal Studio Hollywood's next thrill ride, Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift, which is supposed to be up and running for the summer of 2026. So, anyway, as we close up here, want to thank Mark and Jody Rugg for sharing those photos of their family's trip to Universal Studios Hollywood back in 1965, which gave us an opportunity to not just look back at the Ma Pa Kettle film series, but also reminisce about this park's original petting zoo. And again, those scary, scary birds from The Birds.
Jim, that was quite fascinating. I literally, when you said, "Oh, we're going to do a show on Ma Pa Kettles," because we saw, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It was one of those things where it's one of those shows or movies, that I did not know exist. But now I'm kind of thinking to myself, well, I should seek out, at least watch a little bit of it, see what the heck's going on with Ma and Pa. And
I just, don't get me wrong. I actually used to watch these. In fact, we had a television station in Boston. I want to say it was WNAC, and they had a kids show called Major Mud, and Major Mud during April and February school vacation would run Universal movie, and that was the other thing. You have to understand that these things were 90 minutes long, if that. So they were ideal for if you had a 2-hour block of time that you had to fill on a kid's show. You would run one of these and periodically cut away to a commercial. But yeah, they ran the Ma Pa Kettle movies. That's how I met everybody that Abbott and Costello met, thanks to Major Mud. He ran Abbott and Costello Meet the Keystone Cops. Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer Boris Karloff. I got to see all of those movies there. But I will say this is a 6-year-old that dutifully sat there eating my Captain Crunch, watching these things early in the morning. Even I will like, wow, this is a really bad movie. But in order for me to go watch something else, I'd actually have to get up and walk over to the television and turn that knob. And that's not happening, pal.
Right. Well, I think for my sake, I will seek it out to know who some of these players were that you were talking about, just to see what the heck it is.
Okay.
I can't promise I'm going to finish all 9 of those.
No. That would be. I think they actually use all 9 of the Ma Pa Kettle films to break prisoners in Guantanamo. But all right.
Well, listen, I think it's important. If you guys have seen Ma Pa Kettle, I would love to hear your thoughts and tell us which one's the best. You tell me which one's the best. That's the one I'll give a look at.
Okay, there's the way to go.
That's it.
Okay. So, but at that point, I think we have come to the end of this week's installment of the Epic Universal Podcast. So, Eric, where can the nice folks find you if, like Mark and Jody, they want to pass along some of their memories of the park or suggest some future stories?
Hey, you can find me on pretty much all the social medias at Eric Hersey. And Jim, where are they able to send pictures and story suggestions and everything to you?
Well, I am still on X and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and then over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And I guess that's going to do it for this week's show, folks. So thanks for listening, and stick around for what's coming up this month over on the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and if you like what you heard, head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. This really helps get the word out about our shows. We also have some other shows on the network that you might like. Each week, we drop a brand new Disney dish with Lon Testa. For animation and movie news, please listen to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. By the way, you can also check out Drew's other podcast, Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which he does with Charles Hood. For all things Lucasfilm, why don't you subscribe to Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn? Likewise, we have I Want That Too with the lovely Lauren Hersey, our weekly podcast that features the latest merch and the stories behind that merch. And our Epic Universal Podcast takes a look at the Universal theme park. So please join Eric Hersey and I on that weekly. If you enjoy theme park history, we also host Manufacturing the Magic with Shelley and Noah Valladolid. That podcast tells the story of how we got the modern theme parks that we enjoy today. Join myself, Len Testa, and veteran Imagineer Jim Schul for our latest season of Disney Unpacked, our first ever video series exclusively for Patreon. These get released first Sunday of every month, and each month we release several exclusive podcasts to help support this video series. I want to thank everyone that supports the Jim Hill Media Network. For more information about podcasts and content, head on over to jimhillmedia.com. So that's going to do it for now, folks. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch up on the next show.